Welcome everyone to another episode of Into the Pit. And I have here Miss Sandie Byrne, all the way from Ireland. I wanted everybody to know about you first, and then we're going to get into a conversation about your abilities. So tell us about you.
So there's not much to tell. I'm very unexciting, I have to say. I grew up here in Tipperary in Ireland. And if you imagine Ireland like a teddy bear, the map of Ireland looks a bit like a teddy bear. So we are the belly button, so kind of just south of centre in
Okay.
Ireland. And I was here until I was 17. And then I went to live in Germany for a little while. And then I lived in London for a little while. And then I came back to Ireland. So I'm a wife. I'm a mother of two boys. I have a German Shepherd dog. I have two cats, and I live in the middle of the countryside, miles away from anything, and we're very happy. And that's my life story in a nutshell. I'm afraid
so,
I'm very boring.
so I know the first question that people always ask when they get a medium on is when did you get your abilities? But I want to expand that question, and I want to know the
Sure.
first experience that you ever had when you realized that you had abilities, and how did you react to it?
Okay, so I won't remember my first experience because I don't remember a time where I didn't see dead people. Okay, my grandmother was a medium, my great grandmother was a medium, my great great grandmother, and all the ladies in that side of the family were all mediums. So the first time that I realized that not everybody could see it, I was 7. Okay, but that's the kind of age where logic kicks into people anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And kids don't want to be different from other kids. So it just so happened that my nanny, my grandmother, who I was very close to, died quite suddenly. She was just 56 years old, and I was just turned 7 years old. And I was at the hospital with my mother the day that she died,
Mm-hmm.
and it was 1982. So there was no mobile phones. So my mother said to me, stay there and I'll go to the nurse's office and I'll ring, my dad and my brothers and sisters, whatever. And so while she was away, I was sitting down. They had the curtain pulled around the bed, and I was sitting there holding my nanny's hand. And at the same time, and this is the thinking of a child, because I can remember this so clearly, I was sitting there holding her hand. I didn't know what passed away meant. I thought she passed out or she was asleep. I didn't realize that she was, dead.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time as she was lying in the bed and I was holding her hand, she was also standing behind me playing with my hair. Okay, because I had very red hair. It's curly, as you can see, and it was really, really long. And she used to love playing with my hair. So to me, this didn't seem weird. And I was talking to her, and I remember the nurse sticking her head in through the curtain and asking me, was I okay? And I said, yeah. And she said, who are you talking to, love? And I said, Nanny. So she said nothing. She just left again. And a couple of days later, the day that my grandmother was buried, we had a very Irish wake. My grandparents lived in a lovely cottage just across from a woods. And we were there all day and all night. Lots of beer was drank. And I remember thinking, because my mother's one of 10 children, and she was a single mom, so we were raised with all of these like brothers and sisters. So I had like 5 uncles, which to me were like 5 big brothers. They were the big strong guys. You always looked to them for everything. I couldn't figure out why they were so upset.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to my mother, I was particularly close to one of my uncles called Kevin, and I said to her, why is Kevin crying? And I got the story about how Nanny's gone to heaven to live with Holy God. And I was like, but she's not. She's over there sitting on the couch beside Granddad, because I could see her. But
Right.
then I realized, because everybody went, oh, when there's a collective oh in the room. And as a child, then you're like, oh, I've done something wrong. But I could clearly see her. She used to sit on the arm of the couch beside my granddad with her arm around his shoulders, and I could still see her sitting there. So I went under the table and I stayed there for the night. So my mother and I had this conversation the following day about not everybody sees what I see, because my mother knew from me talking about, things that were happening at home. So up to that point, because obviously when you realize that not everybody can see this, you think that you're not supposed to see this. But up until that point, I had a BFF before BFFs were even invented. I had this little boy, and every single night when my mother put me to bed, a lady used to bring this little boy in to my room, and she used to tuck him into bed with me, and we used to sleep. And she used to sit in the room and watch us. She actually used to sit on top of the wardrobe. I don't know why, but she was on top of the wardrobe. And then in the morning, she would come and she'd take him away just before my mother used to come in to get us up for school or whatever. So, and obviously I didn't realize at the time, but he was a spirit. He wasn't like, a human boy. He was a
Right.
spirit boy. So I don't remember a time. That's a very long-winded answer to your question. I apologize.
Oh, no, no, no. You
But
go on. I love hearing these stories.
yeah, so I don't remember a time where I didn't see spirit, but definitely the first time that I realized that it was different to what everybody else saw. I was 7 years old. It was at my grandmother's funeral.
Was it almost like a devastating thing to know that you were different, or
Yeah, no kid wants to be different. Every kid
right?
wants to be the same as the other kids. We want to have the same fancy shoes. We want to have the same hairstyles. So everybody wants to be the same. So, and it's funny because kids up to that age too, they don't talk about things, like anybody who's a parent, they'll know when kids go to school, they have their school life, and then they come home and they have their home life, and like
Mm-hmm.
never the twain shall meet. They don't mix the two. And it's the same with mediumship, or seeing spirits. I didn't necessarily talk to my friends about it up to that age, but I definitely didn't want them to know after that, you know. And I pushed spirit away for years. Like all through my teenage years, I used to have a spirit guide that used to come into my bedroom, and like he'd knock the clock off of my bedside locker, he'd pull the duvet off the bed, or continental quilts as we used to call them back then. They weren't duvets, they were continental quilts. And he used to pull that off the bed and shake the bed. I was the youngest, so I had the smallest room with the single bed. And he just used to cause havoc, but it was trying to get my attention. It wasn't that he was trying to harm me. He was trying to get my attention.
Hey, pay
So I
attention.
used to, yeah, I'm here. Come and talk to me, please. And when it changed for me, then when I started to embrace it, well, when I was 15, my granddad had come to live with us. He was a widower, obviously, after my grandmother passed, and he got cancer, so he came to live with us because my mother looked after him, and he passed away. And then just 10 weeks later, my uncle Kevin, that I was very close to, passed after a motorcycle accident. He used to race motorbikes, and he had an accident in a race. So there was just 10 weeks between them, and I was devastated because my granddad is still the love of my life. He was my
Mhm.
father figure, my role model. I
I know
just
what you
loved.
mean.
And then Kevin, who was like my big brother, my bestie, he was the one that got me into motorbikes because I used to ride motorbikes myself until I had babies and I couldn't manage to strap the baby seat to the back of the bike. So, but I always had a bike. And um, when the two of those died, yes, I could get that my grandfather had died. He was 70 years old, but he had cancer. And Kevin, I'd spent the whole week with him before he passed. And then he left Thurles on the Friday and he died on the Saturday. So the next time I saw him, he went from perfectly healthy 31-year-old to, being in a coffin. And I
Yeah.
couldn't forgive Spirit. I was so angry because I said, look, you're coming into my room every night. You're trying to get my attention. You want me to give your messages to people, and yet you can't even let me keep my own loved ones here. I said, it ain't happening. So then I went to Germany. I was 17 years old and I was living in Germany. And I went out for a run one day, and it was the middle of the afternoon, and I lived in like what they call the Weinstrasse, which is like southwest Germany. It's just like it's where they make the wine. There's like vineyards for
Oh,
miles and
okay.
miles and miles. It's like really it's really quiet.
Yeah.
So you could run for miles and you wouldn't see another person. So this was in the 90s. I had my beautiful orange foam headset and my personal cassette stereo, and I was listening. I was listening to Simon and Garfunkel. I never forget it. And I was running along the road, and I'd been ignoring Spirit for a long time. And next thing I heard someone shout at me, "Run!" Okay. And I was 17 years old, and the first thing that comes to your head is someone's taken the proverbial here. They're making fun of me because I was literally running. Okay. So I kind of looked around expecting to find maybe a teenage boy or something behind me, making fun of me, but there was nobody there.
Oh, wow.
And so I thought I must be hearing things. So back on went the music and I started running again. And then I heard run, run now. So I turned off my music. And literally I was standing like in the middle of this small road. It was vineyards for miles around. And I literally did a 360 looking around. I said, somebody is here. They're making fun of me. I could hear this voice so clearly. And I heard this run quick, like somebody whispered in my ear. And then I turned around because a car came, and like there was very few cars on this road. And I still see it, when something happens in slow motion. And so this car passed. It was a small black hatchback. I remember that. I talk in cars that they're blue and green. I don't necessarily talk in makes and models. It was a small black hatchback, okay? And there was 5 guys in this car. And I can still remember, when music is so loud, it's like doof, 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 and it was that kind of music. And this car passed, and I can still see it like in slow motion. And they all looked at me as they passed, and I looked at them. And the car just passed and went on. And there was nobody else around. So I started running again. And then I heard this run like F, run now, now, now. And I actually thought I was going mad. So I did. I turned and I ran into the vineyard and I hid between 2 rows of vines. And I can remember thinking to myself, I'm so glad that nobody can see me because I feel really, really stupid. How would I explain this to somebody,
Right.
And just at that minute, the car came back. So they'd gone up the road, they'd done a U-turn, and they came back, and 5 guys got out. And I'm not joking. They spent more than 20 minutes searching around. They spread out. Some went to the other side of the road. Some was at my side of the road. And they were like literally beating the bushes looking for me. And one guy got about 2 meters from where I was hiding. And I thought, oh, here. And when you're so terrified, you can just hear your heart and you can't hear anything else. But I could
Yes.
see there was a guy because it was like slanted down. The vineyards are all slanted down from the roads that the water runs away. And I could see the guy at the top. He was shouting something, but I could only hear my heart beating. And he was calling them all. So they turned and went back up and they got into the car and they left. So I still waited another 20 minutes or so before I moved, and I ran home via the vineyards, the back way home.
Gosh.
So when you're 17, you don't necessarily think of what could have happened to you. I still felt stupid, and I still felt I'm not telling anybody that I hid in the vineyard, And I remember thinking, it was years later when I was living back in Ireland, I read a magazine, and there was a story in it of a girl in the United States, and she had taken a lift from a truck driver. And when they stopped for something to eat, she went to the bathroom. And as she was washing her hands, she heard a similar voice. And the voice said to her to climb out the window and run and not to look back. And like that, she looked around and there was nobody there. So she continued washing her hands, and she heard the voice again. And she said she could remember looking, thinking, I'd have to climb up on the sink to climb out the window. How stupid would I look?
Right.
So she didn't, and she went back out, and this guy kept her for 8 years in the basement of his home.
No.
Yeah. She
Oh my
escaped, but
gosh.
it was 8 years before she escaped, and I don't need to tell you why he kept her, you know
Oh,
that.
yeah.
So it was only when I kind of read that I was thinking, what could have happened? I might not have been heard of ever again. Could have been
Yeah.
one of those missing stories. But I did know at the time that something bad could have happened, and that spirit had probably saved me. So I did start to communicate with them from there. I did start to listen to them more, and I ended up with a very close relationship with them. But nobody puts on their form at school that they want to be a psychic medium for a living. When the career guidance teacher comes around, nobody says that. So it was years later. I was probably in my late 20s or early 30s before I really started to connect with spirit. Obviously I'm only 21 now, so I'm imagining what's going to happen in the future. I'm being tongue in cheek now. I am over 21. But yes, I would have had many, many experiences over those years. But how I got into working, I know I'm going way ahead now. You'd have to tell me to shut up. I have kissed the Blarney Stone, so I rarely stop talking. But it was years later, I went to see a medium at an event. The first one that I went to see a famous medium that had come over from the UK, and he was in Limerick here in Ireland, which is it's about, I don't know, 60, 70 kilometers from where I live. And I went to see him there, and he came to me. He came and met me in the auditorium after the show, and he said to me, "You are a medium."
Oh,
And I
wow.
looked around me to see who he's talking to. And he said, "No, you," he said, "you have lots of spirit around you. You're a medium." And I said, "Well, can you tell them to go away, please? Because I need to get a night's sleep, because at nighttime spirit always come and talk to you." So I went to see another medium about a year or so later in my hometown of Thurles. And during the show, there was a lady on stage, and she was a very good medium. But all I could feel was the energy from the lady and the gentleman that were sitting in front of me.
Hmm.
And a lot of people you can feel when someone's stressed, you can feel when there's distress, you can
Yeah.
feel this from people. So when the interval came, I tapped her on the shoulder and I said, "Please don't leave." And have you ever done something in your life and your mind is saying, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it," but it's coming out of your mouth anyway? Okay.
Yes.
So I tapped her on the shoulder and I said, "Please don't leave." I said, "Your son is here, but you're so upset that he will not go up on stage to talk to that woman." I said, "Because he doesn't want to leave you here upset," because we were right up the back. And she turned around and she looked at me and she said, "Is he here?" And I said, "He is." And so we started having this conversation. I started telling her all this stuff about him. And it was one of those things where I'm like, I don't know how I know this, but I'm saying it, so it must mean something.
Right.
And I started telling her all this stuff, and he told me lots of personal stuff and whatever. And she just stood up and she gave me this huge hug. And she called me Lovey. And she said, "Lovey," she said, "he's actually my grandson, but I raised him from birth."
That's
She
why they
said, "So
come
he
across to that
was
energy.
my son." Yeah. So at the end of the show, when everyone claps for the lady that was on stage and she left the stage, and then there's that awkward minute where everybody's silent before they start leaving.
Hmm.
So this lady stood up and she said, "Excuse me, everybody." She said, "Never mind that woman on the stage. It's this girl here behind me that you want to go and see." And I'm Irish. I've got red hair and I lots of freckles and I go red very, very easily. And I was bright red. I was so embarrassed. And I was going to, "No, no, no." So with the result, everybody came up and wanted my phone number. So by the end of that night, I had 3 months worth of bookings
Oh my gosh.
for readings.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
absolutely. And I never looked back. I never looked back from there. And that's how I am where I am today.
Man. I wanted to ask you, do you ever see anybody behind me while we're talking?
There's a man there. There's a gentleman who would have had maybe some kind of a heart condition. I feel he was ill before he passed, but he passed very quickly. Like everything happened very quickly around him at the end. And he's not an elderly gentleman. I want to say he's only in his early 60s.
Hmm.
Now he is coming
Oh,
in from your mom's side of the family, I feel.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I think I
Yeah.
know who you're talking about.
So I'm not particularly connecting, I wasn't particularly trying to connect in with your energy, but sometimes you're just aware. Like I always say, have you ever heard of Teresa Caputo?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so like she's only kind of getting known over here now, but I've been watching her on YouTube for years because I love watching her because she's funny, right? But you can't walk down the street here in Ireland and say to somebody, "Excuse me, but there's a man standing beside you." Okay, you just can't say that. I've had hot coffee thrown at me for doing things like that.
Oh my
Okay,
gosh, really?
so you just can't do it. But I did to a lady. I was buying granite. I was having a room done up and I was getting a new fireplace and I was in buying granite. And the woman said to me, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, "Well, I have my own business. I just tell people I have an online business. I don't necessarily tell them what I do." And she said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, actually," I said, "I talk to dead people. And before you ask me, your husband's beside you here, da 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 da." And we went on. And she went white and she said, "Okay, I can't talk about it anymore. Still, I'll get too upset." But she did come to me for a reading afterwards. But it's not something that you would do over here. It's, people aren't quite as open to it as they would be maybe in some other places. And
Uh,
it's nothing to do with religion. It's just, it hasn't been as popular. It's starting to get more mainstream. But like where I grew up, okay, you know that Ireland would have been predominantly Catholic for many, many years. So where I grew up in Thurles, this is where they used to train all the priests, the Catholic priests, okay? So I went to convent school for 13 years. you didn't talk about seeing dead people. Okay,
Well,
it just wasn't done.
I can
And
imagine.
as I went to school every morning, you would see about 800 to 1,000 student priests processing across the street. There's this huge college there. It's used to train teachers now, but it was just for training Catholic priests back in the day. And they would all process from the college down the long avenue across the road and into the cathedral for morning mass.
Mhm.
So this was where I grew up. So you didn't talk about it. You know, you didn't talk about seeing dead people. It wasn't that acceptable. It's still not necessarily, you know, I'd still have people. It's, I don't know, is this an Irish thing, but you know, your own local people would be the last people that would support you in anything, you
Mm.
know. Everyone that I read for, you know, is nearly abroad. I mean, I do have some people in Ireland, but the majority of people that I would read for would be abroad, you know, Australia, Dubai, Canada,
Wow.
States. You know, I've even gone to Denmark to do readings, and the Netherlands and the UK. So like worldwide. But these are countries that, you know, would have accepted this for many, many years.
Yeah.
Now I say that, but am I talking too much?
Oh, no, no. This is your time. You talk all you want. I'm enjoying
I
it.
say that, but my great grandmother, she was a reader also. Back in the days, she probably would have started reading maybe, I guess my grandmother was born in the 1920s. So she would have been reading from them up until when she died in the 70s. Okay. My great grandmother, and my grandmother herself, the lady that passed at 56 in 1982, she read tea leaves.
Hmm.
But my great grandmother was a very well known medium. People used to come, like she had no telephone in her house. There just wasn't telephones in the houses back then. People used to come and queue up outside her cottage from 6 o'clock in the morning to get
Golly.
readings.
No
Yeah.
way.
And she'd get up in the morning and open her curtains, and she'd have like a huge queue of people waiting outside for readings. And my mother can remember going out shopping with her grandmother down to the village. It's just a small village in Tipperary. And she said people would be putting, because my great grandmother used to read palms, and they used to put their palms out in front of her face, like while, you know, she was picking up her bread and milk and stuff, saying, "What's happening for me, Ellen? What's going on for me, Ellen?" You know. So she was very well known. And you know what? I always say that lady was a saint. I don't remember her because I think I was 2 or something when she passed. But she had a family of, I think she had 6 children, and she took 2 boys in from the UK during the war,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
and they didn't have anything to eat or, you know, to share, but she still took in 2 boys during the war, and like they adored her, so they did.
Oh,
And
I
her
bet.
two of her boys went and fought in the Second World War. One of my granduncles was a pilot, and one was a tail gunner. I don't know, do they have such a thing as a tail gunner anymore?
I
They do.
assume that they do.
Yeah. And they both survived the war, thank God. But anyway, that was my great grandmother. So that's the side that the mediumship would have mostly come down from, would be my grandmother's side. And what might interest you more with the paranormal is my grandfather's side. My grandfather, my family are O'Brien, which is a very Irish name. There's lots of O'Briens.
Oh, yeah.
And you ever heard of the Banshee?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
my great grandfather, he was the guy before we had undertakers in every town and village. Okay, there always used to be somebody from the village who would prepare bodies for burial. And
Mhm.
my great granddad used to do that job. And being an O'Brien, he was susceptible to seeing the Banshee. So there was this one night, and his neighbor wasn't even sick. Nobody knew the neighbor was sick. But my granddad couldn't sleep this particular night. He said something, my great granddad, I beg your pardon, he said something had kept him up. So he made himself a cup of tea and he was pacing around the kitchen, and he looked out the window. And now the nearest neighbor was like 2 fields away, but you could kind of see the light in the house, you know.
Right.
And he said, he said he just saw the Banshee leave, and he knew straight away that he died. So he got dressed and he packed up his bag on the back of his bicycle. He didn't have a car, he just had a bicycle. And he headed down, like in the middle of the night, down to the neighbor's house. And he met the priest. When he was almost at the neighbor's house, he met the priest who was just leaving the house, having anointed the guy who died. And he said to my granddad, "Is somebody else dead?" Because he couldn't figure out how my great granddad knew that this guy had passed, because he didn't have a telephone, and it was always the priest's house that got the phone call first when someone dies.
Hmm.
And my great granddad said to him, "No, I just saw the banshee leave." He said, "I knew somebody had died, so I said I'd come down." So he was very successful at his job because he always saw the banshee leave before when someone was passing away, you
Now,
know.
isn't the lore that if you hear and you see the banshee personally, that means you're gonna die, or is it just somebody
No,
has died?
it's somebody has died.
Okay.
Yeah. It would generally be someone you know. You're not going to see the banshee every time someone's going to die. So it would be generally someone close to you. And he was quite friendly with the neighbor.
Yeah.
So he saw the banshee leave his house that night.
I
Yeah.
divorced one, so okay.
They have a similar one. I am like that would be the Irish version, but there's one in Scotland as well. They call
Mhm.
her something different. I think she's the washerwoman or something like that.
Oh,
And apparently she's seen people talked a lot about her, say during wars and stuff like that. So she would be seen washing uniforms, bloody uniforms,
oh.
even before people would get word from the military that their loved one was killed in battle or whatever. She would be seen washing the uniform.
Now you were talking about Teresa Caputo.
Yeah.
That I would assume that all that's already set up. That somebody, she's talking to already knows that they're going to talk. The reason why is that it's an invasion of privacy. You just go up and start doing a reading on someone. So and most of the psychics that I talk to, or mediums that I talk to, they all say the same thing. You don't just go up and do that to somebody. it's
Yeah.
it's rude.
Yeah.
So I have
I
a
mean,
feeling they set those up and say, you can read this person. I'm sure she is doing an actual reading. I just
oh
think
yeah.
they already know that they're going to talk.
Yeah, I just always assumed that, maybe like, that I saw one episode where she was taking her dog to the groomers and she was getting the dog done, but she did a reading for the lady that worked there. So I assumed that maybe she went into the shop, she felt something, and, that she would have asked before she gave the
Yeah,
reading because,
exactly.
that would be respectful. Yeah, 100%. And I would, because I made the mistake in a place where I worked years ago. I we were in the break room. I don't know, I suppose we have a lot of the British customs and that we have to have mid-morning tea and mid-afternoon tea, so they're breaks that are built into our workday.
Hmm.
And so I was sitting in the room and we were just having chat. A lot of staff members were in there, and I just turned to the lady beside me and I said to her, "Who's Paul?" I said, "Because he's telling me it's his birthday and that I'm to say happy birthday to you." And she looked at me and she says, "I don't know." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I remember going, "But he says," and at that moment she threw a scalding cup of coffee over me and she told me to shut up. Okay. So I found out later that this poor woman had had a son that she named Paul who was stillborn on that date.
Oh no.
You know,
Oh.
how was I to know that it was, I was just kind of giving her what I got, but I'm never just given an unsolicited reading.
Yeah.
But you're asked for readings all the time. Like I've been checking into hotels for like events and stuff.
Yeah.
And the receptionists go, "Oh, you're the medium. Do you see anybody around me? Do you see anybody around me?" you know, and I kind of liken it to a plumber. Every time you meet a plumber, do you tell them about your your washing machine or whatever? Sometimes we just want some time off.
Yeah, I know how that goes. I've worked for the city, and as soon as
Yeah,
people found out that I worked for the city and I was in that city, then they would start telling me all the problems. Hey, can you talk to
yeah,
somebody about the sidewalk that's being cracked? Well, that's not my department, but I guess I could pass that on. It does get
sure.
overwhelming. I normally would not ask my guests to give me a reading or anything like that, but I do leave myself
No,
open. And
yeah.
because it is rude, but at the same time, I think, well, there's somebody out there who is going to want to know if you're for real. So
Oh
it,
no, I mean, in this situation, I would expect it because we're here
yeah,
to talk about mediumship. But if I'm booking into a hotel or I'm paying for my potatoes in a shop, you're not necessarily expecting to be asked, because I know you've probably spoken to a lot of mediums or paranormal investigators or whatever,
Hmm.
and you know it's exhausting, I suppose is the word.
I
It
can
is, it's
imagine.
exhausting, you know and you do it for a living. So like that, when you left work, when you were working for the city, when you left work, you really didn't want to think about cracks in the pavement. And I never thought that I would get to a point where I didn't want to talk to spirit, but sometimes you just don't, right?
Time
Because at
out.
the end of the day, yeah, exactly, 100%. um but I love the whole topic of paranormal investigation. Have you done many paranormal investigations? I'm going to
uh,
interview you now.
well, I've been investigating for what, 8 years now.
Wow.
Went
You
to
should
some
come
pretty
to
cool
Ireland
places. I
because
really
there's
want to.
loads of places here. I take
Um,
my son, he's 14 now, but the first time when he was about maybe 7 or 8, when he started talking to me about, what he could feel and stuff like that, I took him to this place. It's one of the first settlements that was ever, when people started living in Ireland first, like it's
mm,
thousands of years old. And yes, they've renovated them a little bit, but the houses, the little huts that they lived in, were still standing.
mhm.
And they're called cranogues, okay, is what the little houses were called. So they kind of had made a little island in the middle of a lake because the water would give you protection from invaders, right? And they lived there. So long
Right.
story short, I took him down there just to see if he could feel anything. And so we were there, and it was really quiet the day we were there. I think it was the first day that they were open for the season. It was probably around April time or something.
Right.
And he just started talking about all the people that he could see coming and going, and what they were doing, and this woman that was telling him all about her. Like, I think, for anybody who has any kind of interest in afterlife paranormal, just go to an old building, and see what you feel from it. Because you can get so many. I mean, yes, we're lucky here in Ireland. We've got so many castles and, really old
That's
buildings.
why I want to go. The castles.
Yeah. So where I live, there's a place called the Rock of Cashel. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
So it's about 1100 years old. It's where the High King of Ireland used to live before, when we had a royal family,
Hmm.
before those British came over. um, so that's just down the road from me. So we would have gone there a lot, as I was growing up and stuff. So when you go to places like that, you can feel the energy. You've done a lot of investigations. You
Oh
can
yeah.
feel it. Okay.
Yes.
But this is where I suppose I would differ from a lot of people. To me, that energy is just a footprint. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody is still living there. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone is still suffering.
But they left their
Okay.
energy.
They left their energy. It's like a footprint. So I did a paranormal investigation. I was invited to do one with the local paranormal group a few years ago. And we went to a castle that's not far from me. There's like, I'm looking out the window of my house here when I'm talking to you. There's a castle in the field behind me. There's castles everywhere, right? So we went to this castle. It's called Clomana Castle, and you can actually hire it. A lot of Americans come and they just hire the castle for the weekend. So they'll come in, like 15 or 20 of them, and they'll stay in the castle for the whole weekend. But
So
we did a
cool.
paranormal, yeah, we did a paranormal investigation there. And so I was the resident medium for the night. So we were going through the castle, and there was this little boy. I could sense the energy of this little boy in the room.
Hmm.
And I showed the group like where he was and everything. And he was crying and he was panicking. And I got really hot, and I said, I think there must have been a fire in here. This little boy died of the fire, but he's upset because he's calling for his mother and father, and there's nobody here. So we did the whole night. We went up to the top floor as well, which is actually closed to the public at the moment, because that part isn't renovated.
Hmm.
But in this particular castle, the lady that lived there years ago was kind of kept prisoner there by her husband. Okay, so she had the top floor for herself, but he was very jealous. He didn't let her out or anything, all of this kind of stuff. And she was scared of him. So, and there is actually a picture, because I was saying to the group, I said, she's here. She's literally like sitting on my shoulder. So they took a picture, and you can actually see the lady's face on my shoulder where I pointed, my left shoulder, that night. So she was so scared of her husband. And I said, she's terrified of him. I said, I can feel the terror. But so at the end of the night, everything that we had come up with during this investigation, we met with the custodian in the morning, and everything that I had come up with, she was able to validate. because all of the castles, I'm sure everybody knows this anyway, but every castle was originally built in timber. They were wooden castles, but every one of them burnt down because they didn't have electric, so they used candles. So the castle, there was, there was a fire in every castle,
Of
and when they
course.
rebuilt them, they rebuilt them in stone. So
Hmm.
this castle had burnt down, and the family all died in it. The little boy was found; the remains of him was found by his bed in that room where I sensed
Oh,
his energy. And his parents were upstairs. The mother was locked in that room, kept virtually prisoner in that room by the father, who was a very jealous man, and she was petrified of that man, but they all perished in the fire.
oh no.
So, like, I think, to me, a lot of people hear that and think, oh my God, that little boy is spending eternity crouched in the corner, overcome by smoke and crying for his parents. He's not. But the memory of what happened will always remain in that room.
Yeah.
Always. So it's like I was explaining this actually in my podcast last week. When we talk about clairaudience, okay, you familiar with the terms, the seven clairs, as I call them?
Yes. Which
So
I think
when we
that's my ability.
clairaudient,
Yes.
brilliant. So when you tell people you can hear spirits, they think that you hear the actual voice of the person, but you don't always.
Mm,
Okay, you might hear them call your name in their voice, but what that is them igniting a memory of when they called your name when they were alive. Because don't forget, we're talking about spirit here who don't have a voice box. They don't have a physical body anymore, so they
right.
can't string words together in the same way that we do.
Right.
So a lot of clairaudience, when we hear it, it's our own voice, but their words. Do you experience it that way?
Yeah, it's so weird. See, I don't pursue any abilities, but
Hmm.
it's something that's happened to me for as long as I can remember, where I'll be in a room, I'll be by myself. I mean, there might not even be anybody in the house, no television going, no radios going,
Yeah.
nothing. And then all of a sudden I'll hear, God, what? And I'm looking,
Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
talking to me? Something along the, hey, or they'll say something and I can't quite make out what they're saying. And
Hmm.
it happens. It's so weird how that happens. I just thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, but
No.
apparently I have this ability, but like I say, I've never tried to pursue it.
And I'm a firm believer that everybody has an ability to connect with spirit.
That's
I
what I
don't think that
understand.
I don't do anything that anybody can't do. Like, I'm
Yeah.
nothing special. You can say I'm a psychic medium, but everybody's a psychic medium. It's like it's the same way as saying everybody can speak German, but we just need, to take classes to bring it out of us. Okay,
Oh,
we all have the ability. It's like, believe it or not, I'm a really good singer. Trust me, you don't want to hear me sing, but I could take classes, and that's what mediumship classes are about. It's just to teach you how to bring out the different abilities that you have. So
right.
I do believe that everybody is, but people, and I teach mediumship, and sometimes when I get people coming to my class and they say, but I don't hear his voice, they're expecting to hear a particular voice.
Right.
But clairaudience isn't all about hearing voices either. It's about hearing sounds too. Like, I had a lady for a reading once in this very room where I sit now. I don't see people in person anymore. It's all online. But I used to see people at my house. And I was sitting here with this lady and we were talking about her husband in spirit and everything. And then next thing, this plane flew really low over my house. I literally shook the house. Now, and I don't live anywhere near an airport. You're talking 2 hours to an airport, okay, from where I
Wow.
live. You might see a plane like really high up in the sky, but you
Yeah.
can't hear it because it's that high up, right? But this
Right.
plane literally flew, like literally over the roof of my house. And I ran to the window and I said, what the hell? There must be something going on. There was no airplane there. There was no airplane.
Oh my gosh.
And I turned and I looked at her and I said, well, your husband must have been a pilot. I said, and she looked at me and I said, did you not hear that airplane? And she was white as a ghost. And she said, yes, I heard it. She said, yes, he was a pilot. He
Oh my,
flew for years. And that was his way of getting that message to her. It's definitely me. You know,
wow.
here's the noise. So, clairaudience doesn't have to be a voice, it can be a sound, something that's relevant to that person, and for him, it was the noise of a plane, you know. So, and it's the same when we talk about clairvoyance. Clairvoyance, clair means clairvoyance means seeing. So anyone who's clairvoyant is a clear seer. It means they can see spirit, okay?
Mm.
But it doesn't have to literally be seeing the person, okay? Because you know this, that for a spirit to manifest a vision of how they looked when they were alive, I mean, that takes so much energy. They have to literally manifest a vision of it.
Yep.
They're gone in 20 seconds, and that's why when people talk about seeing ghosts, I say ghosts in inverted commas, but it's very fleeting, isn't it? Okay.
Very.
Yeah. So that's why, because they can only put this vision up for several seconds. So what a lot of people get, myself included, because when people book a reading, they book a reading for an hour. I generally keep them for about 90 minutes because obviously I can talk. But they can show you different things. They put the pictures inside in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So you're literally getting like a video clip playing in your head, or you're seeing a vision of them in your head,
Yep.
or you're seeing, the way it works for me a lot of the time is that I see things, it's like I'm them looking out their eyes, and I
Mm-hmm.
see things the way that they saw it. So,
Oh,
one
wow.
of the common things is like, when someone's been on their deathbed, and I'm going, okay, well, you were sitting, right by their right shoulder. Your brother John was at the end of the bed by their right foot. Your sister Mary was on their left side. Like, the way that they saw all the people standing around them, like I see that. They show me exactly the way they saw things.
Wow.
I had a guy for a reading a few days ago, and his mother came through, and she showed me his door, because she used to come and knock on his front door. I
Mm.
said, you have a green front door and you never gave her a key. And he nearly fell off of his chair because he said she always moaned about this, So I see things the way they saw it. So it's like I'm looking through their eyes. So clairvoyance does not necessarily mean that you have to see a physical vision of
Yeah.
them, you know, as things, as they looked or whatever. And one thing that I consistently explain to people, that to be successful as a medium, and I'm not talking about reading for people, I'm talking about like literally seeing stuff or hearing stuff or feeling stuff, you have to know what your ability is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So for example, if I want a reading, if I want to connect with one of my own loved ones, I go to a medium for a reading. Okay. But I have to think about who they were when they were alive. So I have an aunt, and I was very close to her. I called her my London mammy because I lived with her when I was working in London. And she passed away. She was only 61 years old, God rest her. And we were very close. But when this lady, when she got into her kind of mid to late 50s, she hated photos being taken. Okay. She put on a few pounds, she got a few wrinkles. Now, she was beautiful. And she hated photos being taken of her, or videos taken of her, or whatever. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, bearing in mind that this is who she was, I know that going to a clairvoyant medium is not going to be of benefit to me, because she's not going to show you how she looked when she was alive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But she could talk for Ireland. Okay. She would talk to anybody. There was no secrets, no shyness, nothing. She drove a double decker red bus in
Oh my
London for
gosh.
25 years. She did. And she would talk to anybody. There was no shyness at all. So I know if I want to connect with her, that I'm going to go to a clairaudient medium, because
Mm-hmm.
she will talk for that whole hour, no problem. Okay. So it's about, like, you can't do paranormal investigations without necessarily knowing how you connect to spirit. This makes sense to you, I know.
Yeah.
But I'm continuously telling people this, investigate what you're capable of first, because you don't know what you'll be good at otherwise.
True. Of you know what happened to me, and mind you, I never thought I had any abilities. I just thought they say that was my mind playing tricks on me.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, it got so bad, and I heard all these different voices, and they were all telling me to do different things, like harm myself, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I checked into the hospital. I thought I'd gone nuts, and I spent a little time in there, and I get out, and all of a sudden things started to happen. Like my chair, this is a lazy boy. So, if you're familiar with the lazy boy, they are not easy to move.
Is
I'd
that
get
like
up
a?
and
Oh no, I don't. A lazy boy is a beanbag over here. Is that like a beanbag type seat? No.
No, this is one of those big easy chairs that
I'll Google it.
yeah,
I
you
can't
if
picture it, but yeah.
but they're big, they're heavy. They don't move around that easy.
Hmm.
And I would get up in the morning and it'd be turned upside down.
Yeah.
Well, what the heck, you know?
Yeah.
And then when Michelle and I got together, all of a sudden it kind of amped up a little bit. I guess it's because she
Hmm.
has abilities. And my grandfather, when he passed away, I got a grandfather clock from him. That was just
Wow.
part of my memory of being with grandpa was that grandfather clock.
Grandfather clock. Yep.
Get up in the morning, it'd be laying over on its side. It didn't fall because I would have woke up like
Of
that. Any
course, you'd have heard the bang.
exactly. And just all these different things were happening around the house. And we had a psychic medium come over, and she went through and she was looking. She said there was a portal that was in the back room,
Hmm.
and she said what it is you're getting things that are just passing through, and that's why I'm hearing the different voices and all different things would happen, not the same thing all the time. I literally was less than a block from the cemetery. It was in our neighborhood. I, from my door to being in the cemetery, you could walk in 2 minutes. I
And
just
you
thought I
reckon they
was
were all
nuts.
around?
No, they
No.
were all around. They were all
Yeah,
around.
100%. Um,
Um,
I remember thinking at one stage that I was schizophrenic, and it would probably have been preferable to seeing dead people, in
yeah.
Catholic Ireland at the time. But yeah, I think it's something that everybody goes through when they're, waking up, I suppose, to their ability, and I say it again, it's an ability that everybody has. Okay,
Mm,
everybody can. I suppose we just embrace it at different points, and a lot of us only really kind of get into this, or turn to this when we lose somebody close to us, which is very normal,
yeah.
because that's when you start to think of the afterlife and what happens and can they see me and why is life and what's my soul purpose, all this kind of stuff. So it's scary at first, I suppose, especially the younger that you are, or maybe age doesn't make a difference, I don't know. For me, I suppose I was very young,
Yeah.
but yeah, it takes getting used to, and definitely takes time to control it.
Would you
Like,
just will you let them all know to not be looking at me when I'm changing clothes? That would be cool.
tell them yourself, 100%.
They don't listen to me.
No, they do, because one of the common things that people say to me is that when they come and they'll do a mediumship program with me, and then they, the second or third week they'll come back and they'll go, I'm not getting any sleep. I have spirits all around me at nighttime. And I'll say that's because you don't give them any other time, you know, because spirits don't have a physical body. They don't need to eat or sleep or smoke cigarettes. Even though they might want to smoke a cigarette, they don't have to smoke cigarettes or anything in the spirit world. So when we're lying down, when we're asleep at nighttime, you know, that's the only time that they can come into our energy. Because I say this time and again, when your feet hit the floor in the morning, your mind is full of a million things that you have to do that
Oh
day.
yeah.
Whether you have kids to get to school, something to take something out of the freezer for dinner, put clothes in the dryer, whatever you've got to do. There's a million things that we're thinking of every day.
Hmm.
Where are spirit going to find the room to come into your energy? You Americans, you've got a great saying. You say, I'll hold space for you. You say that to people, right?
Something
I
along that
had to
line.
I had to ask so many people, like, what do you mean by that? Like, it's a saying that, like, a lot of American people said to me, I'll hold space for you. Hold space for yourself. Keep that some space available for spirit to come and heal you or connect with you or encourage you or whatever you need them to do. But hold that space for you, because if you don't, then they have to come to you at nighttime, because it's the only time that you're relaxed enough and not running around the place like a blue-arsed fly, which is what most of us live like these days. Okay.
Right.
And, um, so what I say to people is, if you really want to connect with spirit, sit down for 15 minutes twice a week. You do not have to do 90 minutes of chanting every single day.
Mhm.
10 to 15 minutes twice a week, where you just say to your loved ones or anybody who's around you, This is now your time. Okay. Come and tell me whatever it is that you need me to know or want me to feel or whatever it might be, and give them that time. So if you're not sleeping because you feel that spirits are coming to you, they're waking you up or they're knocking your clock off of your bedside locker or whatever, then I sit up at nighttime because it happens to me, especially when I might like go to bed tonight and I've tomorrow is all booked out for readings.
Mm,
And people are at home and they're saying to their loved ones, I have an appointment with Sandie tomorrow. You're to be there at 3 o'clock and don't be late, right? So everybody's talking to their loved ones the night before. So I'm in bed trying to get a good night's sleep. And they're all coming, oh, I'm here because Magella's coming to see you tomorrow, or I'm here because David's coming to see you tomorrow, or whatever. So I sit bolt upright in the bed and I turn on my bedside lamp and I go, whoa, 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 folks. I say, if it's dark outside, that's my time for rest. Okay.
mm,
So you come back to me in the morning and you can tell me whatever it is that you need me to know, but not now. Okay. And they always listen, but you have to give them the time during the day. Okay.
yeah,
Because if you tell them to F off, then you have to tell them, well, come back to me at 8 o'clock Thursday because I'm going to sit down for 15 minutes and I will listen to everything that you tell me. So make sure you hold that space for your loved ones. That's
gotcha.
the most important holding space. Definitely.
Hmm. Well, I've got to know if there's anybody else here in the room with me.
Who lost the little girl?
Lost little girl. Hmm. I
Very young
don't.
girl. She was likely just a baby when she passed. She may have been stillborn. She may be miscarried. I don't believe by the
Hmm.
way she communicates. And you can tell a difference in someone when they communicate, whether they've lived on this earth or whether they haven't, because they communicate in a different way. So this little girl didn't get to stay here very long because she communicates a little bit differently. So she was lost. She may have been aborted. She may have been miscarried. She may have been stillborn, but she never got to live a life in this world.
Well,
Okay.
the
I'm sorry.
only one that
Go on.
kind of comes to mind, um,
Next to your dad's side of the family.
well, from my understanding, my mother had a miscarriage before I was born.
Oh, God bless her.
So,
Had she ever spoken to you about it?
no, not once.
No.
And I
No,
found
I
out
don't believe.
from I think my grandfather's the one that told me.
Oh, bless him. In that case, I would say probably not. While it would be easy for me to say that, that must be it. I don't think so. And I think that this has more of a connection with your dad's side of the family. Did your dad ever, did he ever talk about maybe having lost a sister, or, a child being, killed when they were very young, or, cot death or anything like this?
No, I knew he had an older brother that basically was born a vegetable. So, uh,
Oh, the poor little pet. This is definitely a girl. Okay. And it definitely connects with your dad's side of the family. And I get the impression that it was a huge, well, a death of a child would be a huge thing. But, one of those huge things that possibly older generations didn't necessarily talk about.
yeah,
Okay. I get her in your energy a lot when I'm talking to you. Okay.
really.
Have you had any issues with your breathing?
Um, from time to time, I have my. It's like I get a real
Uh,
bad pain in my chest.
I just asked her why she's here. Okay. And she said it's because of your breathing that you're not looking after yourself.
Hmm.
Okay. And she wants to encourage you to take more care of yourself. And this is something, it's not, she doesn't come over to nag you, as we'd say, but it may be something that you need to keep an eye on. Speak to your doctor, about what's going on in your chest. But the fact that someone from spirit comes in to remind you of this, it's always just their concern to let you know that you need to look after yourself a little bit more.
Yeah.
You're kind of smiling there, so I think you know what she's talking about.
Well, I mean, I have asthma, but I haven't had an asthma attack in a long time. But the last checkup that I went to, they X-rayed my spine because I have my disease that makes the spine itself deteriorate,
Hmm.
and so it's also the bones are destroying the discs in my back. So and arthritis is just awful. But when I had my X-rays and everything done, they found uh, like a spot on my lung. So
Okay.
I don't know if that's
Well,
it.
be careful. I can't give you medical advice, obviously, because I'm not qualified in any way medically, but I can only tell you what she tells me, and this is why she's here.
They're,
Okay, so
they told me to
she's
come
looking
back
after me.
next year to do the same X-ray. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, not at all. Oh, I was just going to say, bear it in mind. Do whatever you can do. Look at all the holistic options that are available to you within that 12 months. Don't let it get to the point where, sorry now, Kyle, but we can't do anything for you, because that's the medical system that we're living in these days, unfortunately. And that's the world over. We have the social healthcare system, but it doesn't work. So,
And
look
I
after
don't
yourself.
smoke. So just let you know,
No,
I don't smoke.
no, and I was telling Kyle before we started recording, my mom has never smoked a cigarette in her life, and she has lung cancer. So, it doesn't necessarily. And I suppose in our generation, Kyle, I go back to our generation and say that, there weren't smoking laws in our generation. So if you went to a pub or a bar, as you'd call it in the States, you just inhaled secondhand smoke, and that was it, or
It's,
you didn't have a night out.
besides, I quit drinking and I don't like hanging out in those places. I just that's one reason why I don't, is because
Mm,
if I get around cigarette smoke, then it sets off my asthma and then I can't breathe.
100%. Yeah, you're as well off. I don't drink alcohol. But I used to go out a lot when I was younger, as younger people do. But I went out, we had a girls' night out there a few years ago, and like when you go to a nightclub now, all you can smell is, body odor. you know, whereas the smell of smoke used to mask that years ago. There's
Right.
no mask for it now. People are just sweating, and it's just not pleasant. So you'd want to be very drunk to not smell it. So yeah. I don't drink alcohol. I don't have anything against people that drink. I drank alcohol when I tried it, when I was younger. It's just not for me.
I
So
was alcoholic. I mean, you're talking almost 40 years of my life was spent drinking. uh,
really.
30 some odd years. Yeah. Uh, Now, when you do readings, can you kind of hone in on a specific person, or is just whoever shows up?
I like to know nothing about the person before I'm reading. So I don't have any expectations, because I'm harder on myself than anybody else is.
Right.
And if I start to put expectations on myself, then I get stressed and then I can't connect. So I prefer to know nothing about people. But once we're two or three people in a reading, I'll kind of say to somebody, have I connected yet with the person that you were looking to connect with?
Mhm.
And if the answer then is no, I might say to them, okay, well, let's see who else is here. Or sometimes if it's getting really difficult, when I used to see people in person, I used to ask them to have something belonging to the person with them. Okay. Because I can do psychometry, but obviously you can't do psychometry. Are you familiar with the term psychometry?
I think I know what you're talking about, but I could be totally wrong. So I will keep my mouth shut.
So it's where you hold something and feel somebody's energy from it.
Hmm. That's what I
Okay.
was thinking.
So it doesn't even necessarily need to be a photograph, although photographs work well. It could be, I used to say to people, bring photographs, because in the early days when I wasn't confident in readings and stuff, because if I said to somebody, bring a belonging, something that belonged to your loved one, people used to bring like ornaments, and they'd say, well, my granny loved this. And I say, okay, she loved it, but it was in a cabinet for 35 years. She only ever held it once. You want something that somebody wore every day, their watch, their wallet, their car keys, something, that they held often.
I was trying to see if
Um,
I had a picture here, but I don't. That would be the only thing I have on hand, but I don't even have a picture here.
No, that's okay. But with the psychometry, I don't tend to use it so much anymore, but I can do it. I can't even. So I used to say to people, bring something along. But generally now I just say to them, have something around you. Like I read for a woman there a few months ago, and like straight away when she said hello to me, like whoosh, I just felt the energy of her father straight away. And he gave me this vision of himself, and I said, well, your dad is definitely here. I said, and he's this and this. And I talked about the hat, a hat. He showed me himself wearing a hat and the way it was positioned on his head. And he was smiling and kind of joking at the camera. And she just lifted up this photo in a frame. And it was the photo that I had just described.
Oh, wow.
But I couldn't see it because she had it on her desk, beside her computer. Um, but when I described her dad, it was the picture that she had in front of her.
Wow.
So I say to them, keep something that belonged to that person,
Hmm.
because it brings their energy with them. That's another way. So if you're living somewhere in the States and you don't have castles to go to, okay, go to an antique store
We got White
and put your
Castle. Does that count?
a which.
White Castle. It's a hamburger joint.
Oh, is it? Okay. Sorry, I've never heard of that. I'll tell you a better one. My son has just moved to Sweden, and they don't have that many McDonald's there, but they have a chain called Bastard Burger.
Alrighty then.
That's the big one over there, and he says it's delicious. Um, but yeah, so if you're living somewhere that doesn't have like old buildings, because we talked about going to old buildings and feeling the energy and stuff, go to an antique store. Put your hand on as many items as of furniture or belongings, hair combs. If your store sells jewelry and they let you touch it, see if you can feel anything. You know, the biggest thing, okay, and I talked about this as well in last week's podcast. Sorry, I hate to refer to my own podcast, but I was
No,
just
no, no.
talking
You
about it
talk about it too.
there a few days ago, and I was talking about the 8 most common ways, that people connect with spirit. And I was telling people in the podcast, how you know that you're getting something from spirit, okay, is that you have to sit in your own power first. Have you ever heard of the term sitting in the power of spirit?
Not, no, no, I
Okay.
haven't.
So when you're sitting in the power of spirit, that's when you're connected, when you're talking to them, when you're getting information from them. Okay. So, but that's after you connect to spirit. So
Mm-hmm.
before you connect to spirit, you have to sit in your own power. And what I mean by that is you have to know what's going on for you today. Okay. So, for example, if I get up today and I have a toothache, or I stubbed my toe last night, so I've got a really sore toe today, okay, or
Mm-hmm.
something's going on, I have to acknowledge that, okay, because if I'm going in to do a reading for somebody, and say for example their uncle died because they got an infection, he got an infection in his toe and it went gangrenous, and he died of the infection, right? I'm making this up as I go along. I think, isn't there one of the whiskeys that's how the inventor died? Because that's stuck in my mind. I must have been listening to something, but I don't know, it's Southern Comfort or one of them anyway, some whiskey, the inventor of this whiskey, that's how he died. He got an infection in his toe. But for the purpose of this example, so I need to know that I already have a pain in my toe because I stubbed it last night. So I need to connect with my own power, because then if I'm connecting with somebody who died from an infection, a septic infection in their toe, then they need to give it to me a different way. Or if I've stubbed my toe, my right toe, and they died from an infection in their right toe, I might get the pain in my left toe. Do you get what I'm saying? Because they
Yeah,
need to give me the information in a way that I will understand. So if
gotcha.
you don't know what is in your own energy, how can you tell what's in spirit energy? So you have to
Sure.
sit down every day before you try and make a connection and think, okay, well, I've got a runny nose, I've got a sore eye, and I've got a pimple on my backside. Okay. And you have to acknowledge all of those things, because if spirit had anything like any one of those things that they, because some people, like some older gentlemen, their families always remember them wiping their nose with a proper, material handkerchief. Okay. But if my nose is running, I'm not going to get that today. Okay. So they have to give me something different about themselves. So it's the difference in how you feel today before you attempt to connect with spirit, and how you feel when you've called them in. That's
Mhm.
the information that you get from spirit. Does that make sense?
Yes, it definitely does. Definitely
So
does.
sitting in your own power, and we tend to call it meditation. I get it, and it scares a lot of people off. But I always say to people, I don't care if you're washing the dishes, I don't care if you're walking the dog or sitting in a nice warm bath, wherever you are, that you can disconnect from everyday life for 10 or 15 minutes. Okay. You don't call it meditation if the word meditation scares you. Okay. Call
Right.
it sitting in the power.
All
Okay.
right. Sitting in the power.
Yes, it's a nicer way than meditation, because meditation scares a lot of people.
And I don't know why. It seems to be the easiest thing to do. Like, one of the problems is everybody thinks that you're supposed to be able to clear your mind and all this stuff. you try all day long, you're not going to totally clear out your mind. You may be able to
No.
focus on something specifically, but you're always going to have something going through your mind.
And that's why the breath is so important.
Hmm.
Okay. The breath, because yes, breath is your connection, it's your dial tone to connect with spirit energy, but it's also your go to. So when you are trying to make that connection, when you're trying to sit in the power and you all of a sudden think, sugar, I didn't take anything out of the freezer for dinner tomorrow. Okay. Bring your thought back to your breath. Okay. Because that's your reconnection. So it's like stepping back into the, like if you've got a walkie talkie and you can only get, a reception in that corner of the room, think of it like that. You're just stepping back into concentrating on your breath. So you can be out walking, you can be sitting in the park, you can be listening to music. Okay. It doesn't necessarily matter as long as you're concentrating on your breath. Okay.
That's so weird because the last interview that I did just before you came on was another uh, psychic medium, and she said the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's your dial tone, it really, really is. And, you have to have something. Everybody has some little tick, that it helps them to reconnect with life.
Hmm.
Your breath will be your tick to connect to spirit. I promise you. And if you just keep bringing back and you just say to yourself, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. And, then you'll get it. You will 100% get it. Okay, it's not complicated. I probably make it sound more complicated than it needs to be.
That
It's not
sounds simple.
complicated.
It
Yeah, it
sounds
is
simple.
simple. I mean, I have the best conversations with my loved ones by getting them to knock on the wall, because I know that you'll agree with me on this. Because when you're connecting with spirit, okay, for somebody else, you're able to tell them things that you couldn't know. Like, I didn't know that guy's had a green front door. How would I know it? He
That's
lives
true.
3 hours away from me, and I've never been to his house. So um it's things that you different know. So, like, if I know that my granddad was a military man, okay, he was in the military police, he was based on Spike Island during the war, he ran his life like a military operation, and the smell of carbolic soap, I can still smell it when he's around. These are things I know about him. So it's very hard to connect with your own loved ones because they can't give you stuff about them that you didn't know.
Hmm.
Okay. And if they do, then you won't recognize it anyway. Okay. So they have to come through in a way that you recognize.
Of course.
So what I do is I get them to knock on the wall or knock on my desk or whatever. I have pictures of my loved ones, especially Kevin. I have a picture of him here above. And there's some days where you just don't feel like going to work, right? So those days I will look up at him and I'll go, Kevin, I need an old dig out today. My energy isn't as high as it should be. I'm expecting someone called Kyle in 5 minutes. Could you please go and see if you can find any of his loved ones for me, please? You know, so, it's just whatever works. You
Hmm.
have to find what works for you. Okay. The breath is, I think, the best one. It just, but everybody's different, everybody's different. And they'll all tell me, you'll get messages now saying, well, I don't go by the breath, or I use this, or I use that. Whatever works, it doesn't matter. Like, even for people that sit in circle, or they go and watch paranormal investigations, or they're interested in getting into mediumship, like, anybody can only tell you what works for them.
Right.
What you have to do is take 3 or 4 scenarios like that and find which one works for you. You've got to
Right.
play around with these things. Okay. Like, we all drive a certain way when we're doing our driving test, right? But we never drive like that ever again. Okay. So, the instructor will teach you one way. You've got to find whatever way is comfortable for you. Okay. Within the rules of the road. I have to stress that. It has to be within the rules of the road, obviously.
Of course.
But you get what I'm saying. I've never gone over the speed limit in my life.
I'm I'm always a perfect driver. I never do
Yeah.
anything wrong. I've always been an angel too. So just well, there was a specific person I was hoping would show up today, and I guess they haven't shown up. So
No, I guess not. And you were talking to the psychic medium before me. They didn't show up there either.
I actually didn't get deep into that. So, uh,
Cool. Yeah,
but
it's probably just me too, because Monday's my day off. Monday's the only day of the week that I don't connect with spirit.
Oh, sure, you picked that day to take it,
No, because I
to be
save it
on.
from my podcast interviews. So I do all my podcasting on a Monday, and then I read the other 6 days.
No, you said you have a website.
I do, yeah. It's just sandiebyrne.com. It's very simple. Um, I'm sure you'll put it in the description box below.
Oh,
You'll find
yes.
everything that you need to know about me there. I'm on YouTube. I've a lot of questions. I try and answer questions in videos, and I put very short videos up on YouTube if people have questions about it. If you have a question that I haven't answered, email me, and I will definitely answer it for you if I can.
What about social media? Is
Oh
that all?
yeah, I'm on everything. Well, not that I use everything, but I use mainly Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. They're my three platforms for
Uh,
social media.
you know,
It's all linked on the website.
I have all those social media sites, but
Uh-huh.
I hardly ever use them except for LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn.
And I have LinkedIn, but I'm never on it, because I just find it doesn't work. It doesn't do anything for me. Facebook is my main one. I'm always on Facebook, always. But I do tend to copy stuff over to, and I started using TikTok, and then I enjoyed it for a while. It was like a novelty. So I just put up the odd video every now and again when I'm feeling silly, because TikTok is, it's a portal, isn't it? It's a time machine.
I tried to do the TikTok thing, which is really, I don't know. I'm too old for that, I guess.
Yeah, I don't do all the dancing and stuff. I try and put up stuff that's about spiritual, or maybe a clip from an upcoming podcast or something like that.
That's about all I do is clips from the
Yeah.
podcast, and I hadn't even done that in almost 2 weeks. So it goes to show I'm
It's
just not a social media person.
no, it's time. There's just not time enough for everything. And trust me, everybody that wants a reading needs it urgently. That's just life. Everybody wants it urgently. Nobody wants to wait for a reading. So you try and fit as many people in as you can, because everybody tells you that it's urgent. And then they just, some people just want to know, is the person that they love in love with them, which isn't necessarily urgent, life and death situation, but,
To
it's
some
urgent to
people, it
them.
feels
So,
that way.
oh, that's what I just said. Yeah, it's urgent to them. So, you try and fit them in. But it gets overwhelming, and there's just sometimes where I just have to stand back
I
and
don't
just say,
blame you.
you know what, I need a break, you know, because a true empath, they take everything on. And I
Mhm.
have a tendency to do that. And in the early
It's my
days when I was
wife.
doing this full time, is she like that too? Yeah,
Oh
it's
yeah.
very difficult. And when I used to see people in person, I used to have to envisage them, that when they were walking out my door, that they had a backpack on them, and all their problems and their issues and their worries and concerns was in this backpack, so that they were taking it home with them. Because otherwise, I was up at night worrying about it. You
Hmm.
know, and you can only take on so much.
That's
You
right.
know, life is hard enough without taking on other people's problems.
You
You
ain't
can
lying.
help as much as you can, but um, you know, life is tough. We have to look at the good times. And it's been tough these last couple of years.
Oh gosh, don't get me started.
Yeah.
So, and your YouTube it's Sandie Byrne as well.
Sandie Byrne Medium on YouTube. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. It's just
I'll
all
have
Sandie
all
Byrne
those
Medium.
links.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. I'd appreciate that.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time, and so
I could talk to you all night.
I'm telling you, we had a good conversation before we even started this, and
We did.
unfortunately, a lot of it you can't put on YouTube, but
But there you go.
it
We
is what
set
it
the
is.
world to rights. Let's just
That's
reassure
right.
everybody listening that we set the world to rights before we even came to talk about mediumship.
Yeah, it was nothing dirty. It was just, we were
No,
trying to,
no.
we
We're
had
thousands of
opinions.
miles apart. We couldn't get to the dirty stuff.
But
I think I'm
seriously,
about 5 or 6 hours ahead of you. So it's later in the evening here.
yeah, I know the UK is 6 hours ahead, so I don't know what the difference is between you and the
We're the
UK.
same as the UK. Yeah,
Okay,
we're the
well, you're
same.
6 hours.
6 hours ahead.
So it's what, 7:21 where you're at?
It's just gone 7:20. It sure has.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, I'd love to have you come back sometime. I think this was
Oh, I could
awesome.
talk. I could talk to you all night. Absolutely.
I'll
And you
make
know what? I
Hmm.
think you should come onto my podcast and talk about your paranormal investigations. I would love that.
Sure. I would love to do that anytime,
I would
anytime.
love that. Cool. We'll organize that between us.
Okay. Well, I'll have to say to everyone out there, if you are new to this channel, I appreciate you stopping by and I hope you'll come back as well. And for those of you who are regular, thank you for your support. It's because of you that I get to do this. It's pretty amazing. And I love meeting all these folks like Sandie. And I mean, you just have no idea what this has done for me. So until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
Po boy.